Hi there and welcome. This video is about the M5A3 Assault Rifle in Battlefield 2042, and I know there are a lot of nut jobs out there setting it up in all kinds of ways. This might be the weapon with the most diverse settings out there for no good reason at all. I respect the different settings everyone uses. I mean, who am I to judge? But it is a little bit like rotating your monitor upside down just for sport. So, let me help you get it correct. I've done a bunch of weapon videos for Battlefield 2042 now, so many of you already know this, but if you forgot, the video is divided into different sections where I start by looking at real life, what the weapon is like, and some pseudo-nerdy stuff. Since Battlefield 2042 is a game set in the near future, some weapons aren't exact copies of real life, but usually they are based on the model, and if so, that is what we are looking at. Then I take a step into the future, into the game, and dive into how the weapon behaves in Battlefield 2042. That usually transitions quite nicely into the settings, where I go through the best settings for the weapon, in my mind at least. As the final part, I finish it off by concluding how it fares compared to other weapons in Battlefield 2042. Yep, that's it, and if you feel bored at some point or you just really want to check out the settings right away, just use the timeline below to find the part you want to see. As always, before we get going, if you find this video useful at all, please consider giving a thumbs up. It really helps with the YouTube witchcraft. Also consider subscribing to get more content like this in the future. The M5A3 is generally considered to be the DICE interpretation of the MCX Spear produced by Sig Sauer, which was entered in the US Army Next Generation Squad weapon program last year. And just there, I think it's a good opportunity to correct ourselves, since the US Army variant of the MCX Spear is actually called XM5. So there we go. I think it's reasonable to say that the M5A3 is XM5 rather than the MCX Spear, although that can be considered semantics. The US Army awarded Sig Sauer with a 10-year contract to produce the XM5 rifle, set to replace the current M4. Operational testing, though, isn't expected to begin until 2024, so there are still a lot of uncertainties, and so far we are talking about rather small quantities. To give some background, the M4 is a shortened version of the M16A2 Assault Rifle. While the M16 design itself is starting to get rather old, it has seen several modifications. But well, back to the XM5. The XM5 is, as said before, based on the MCX Spear, which in turn was designed based on a smaller Sig MCX just a few years back. It's possibly the most modern weapon construction in Battlefield 2042, at least judging by the weapons that I have made videos for so far. While it's an assault rifle, it's not the typical intermediate powered rifle that we are accustomed to in most video games, with full automatic, easy to handle with great abilities at medium range and to some extent long range. Now, just like other rifles, this too comes in different variants, but generally speaking it's more adjusted towards longer ranges with more power. It's not the sniper rifle or anything of sorts, but rather something similar to the G3 rifle. I mean, it's also an assault rifle, but some consider it prudent to split them into their own subcategory, calling them battle rifles. For me, that is a little bit odd, and I don't think we have any adequate word in Swedish vocabulary for that, but the key thing to bring is that it is a bit more powerful and more likely to be used in semi-automatic mode. It uses a larger caliber than the old M4, which is very direct response to the improvements of body armor. For a very long time, body armor has basically been out of the picture of warfare. In the gunpowder era, it became cheaper to group men without armor with guns, rather than having expensive knights. Since then, armor has mainly been used by cavalry units. In the American Civil War, soldiers tried to make iron and steel vests, even though it never was standard issue. For some, it successfully deflected bullets and saved lives. For others, it resulted in tragedy. Regardless of their effectiveness, many were abandoned since they were simply too heavy to carry on long marches, and also it was fairly common to get harassed by fellow troops for being cowards. I'm not going to dwell on this subject for very long. It's quite obvious that tanks and other armored vehicles are direct responses to this. Protection is often as important as firepower, but as usual, the development of one forces further development of the other. Since World War II and Vietnam, body armor has gotten more attention to mainly prevent casualties from fragments, but development never stands idle, and as a result of that, the US Army is now looking to keep the rifles effective against enemy soldiers. And so is of course other nations as well. But the NGSV is a very direct initiative for just that. Enough of the real life, let's go gaming! With the background of M16 and M4, it's understandable that many players look to set up the M5A3 with a zoom sight, extended barrel and so on, trying to make it formidable at medium to long range and extend that range a bit compared to, let's say, the AK. I mean, the typical M16 in games is often a little bit more... It's a more modern touch of the classical assault rifle, basically an AK with some plastic and more control. Simply put, it's more sophisticated. Personally, I usually end up preferring the AK anyway. I don't know, I guess it suits my playstyle better or something. Maybe it's just some biased feeling. What I do know, however, is that the M5A3 in Battlefield 2042 isn't that typical assault rifle. As a matter of fact, it's not really an assault rifle at all. It's more an SMG. Maybe I should let that sink in for a while. I'm not mad or anything, but setting up the M5A3 for longer distances results in a rather jumpy assault rifle that is fairly ineffective. You could make it work for sure, but my immediate reaction would be, why don't you use the AC-42 or the SFAR? Okay, so skip the longer ranges. What about setting it up as a typical assault rifle? Maybe get some vertical recoil control and still we can use it at the further part of medium range and make it our preferred range? Sure, you could do that, but then again, why not just use the AK or the SFAR? Or actually the AC-42, because it's fairly efficient at that range as well. Before we continue, I know some of you consider AC-42 ruined as a patch 4 and 4.1, but I don't really believe it's that fatal, even though it might be out of contention against sniper rifles. I made a video about the AC-42 before patch 4, and if you look at the top right corner now, you can see a link to that video. Since so many players consider it ruined, I'll probably revisit it fairly soon and make an updated video though. Back to the M5A3, on the contrary how the XM5 behaves, the M5A3 really shines when you set it up for close to medium range. Basically you set it up as a rock solid SMG. Now before you rage quit the video, let me point out that in Battlefield 2042 the range of SMGs are quite insane. The same goes for the M5A3, you don't lose as much oomph at longer ranges as you might think, and to some extent it makes it easier to handle. Let's have a look at this setup, shall we? When patch 4 was released and the attachments got different effects and made more sense, I thought that it would completely change the setup of the M5. It didn't. I mean, there are subtle changes, but not as much as I thought. Then patch 4.1 came and balanced some of the attachment changes made in patch 4, which further asserted my reasoning around attachments over M5. Starting with the barrel, this might surprise some of you. I know that I have said, and many other highly profiled players have said, that you always should use the tactical compensator for the automatic weapons. This might be the exception though. I think you should use the shorter barrel instead. It increases the rate of fire, while slightly, just slightly, decreasing the bullet velocity. This is important because even if it is an assault rifle, DICE apparently completely missed out on the memo about XM5 having larger caliber bullets and generally being more powerful than the M16 and M4. We need those extra bullets. As options, you could try the tactical compensator or the 6KU suppressor, but as I said before, we need a higher rate of fire, and there are too many ways to spot a player in Battlefield 2042 anyway. Also, the suppressor decreases the effective range as well without really compensating for it in any way. When it comes to the sights, it's basically up to each and every one of you. The sight is the most individually opinionated item on a weapon, but as I want this weapon to be really effective as close to medium range, I've fitted a Fusion Hollow, which I always use. As options, I have the TV2 times that I hate, and I have the Maul Hybrid, which I think it's okay. But even if you use the 1.5 zoom, I think there is a penalty of the ad speed, which makes it compromised compared to the Fusion Hollow. Also, the visibility through the Fusion Hollow feels better, and so does the recoil. The later might just be personal bias. I haven't tried it to prove it in any point. I never use the 3x zoom anyway, so it usually means that I should move and flank instead. Looking at the ammunition, I think this might be yet another surprise. I use the close combat mag pretty much always. It's decent size and it improves the recoil control, reload speed and rate of fire. So partly it compensates for the barrel when it comes to recoil control, but it also further adds to the rate of fire. The mag sights, which is decent from start, is further compensated by improved reload speed. Downside is decreased effective range, but on the other hand, you can land more shots faster, so I consider it a gain in the end anyway. Options are mainly there to provide with ammo should I run out of it. I have high power rounds and extended standard issue mag. Don't fiddle around with them unless you have to. Always use the close combat rounds, even at a bit longer distance. If you can't bring down the enemy quickly, you should probably try to flank closer instead. Finally, the grip, and this is actually the only part that I've changed as of patch 4 and 4.1 compared to before. I use the BCG light grip and I always use it. And I think you should do too. Improved adds accuracy, gives a very consistent experience, and the decreased hipfire accuracy is neglectable, like not noticeable at all. I mean, I guess some might run around with laser sights trying to hipfire everything, everywhere, but unless someone is really up in your face, hipfire is a poor choice. Hipfire is the fallback options when you can't track efficiently enough while adds, unless you play Battlefield 5 and use shotgun. Then it's an entirely different story, but now we are playing Assault Rifle in Battlefield 2042 and hipfire is not your go-to option. I do have options for the grip as well, mainly for testing purposes. I repeat, never change grip on this one. The LVG grip provides better accuracy while moving and the Cobra grip provides better accuracy while static, but the downside of either of this is that as soon as you're forced to move or you want to stand still, it results in an inconsistent experience. Using the BCG light grip means that you always get the consistent experience, which makes it generally easier, even if the perfect scenario no longer is that perfect. I think the M5A3 in Battlefield 2042 is a fun weapon when playing with its rather strange setup. The reason I think it's strange is that it doesn't fit the role model of the M5A3, the XM5. Since the XM5 is a very new weapon, this could be understandable, but on the other hand, the behavior of the M5 isn't consistent with the M4 or M16 either. But how much should DICE look at the M4 or M16 at all? Are they relevant? As weapons in the same category, when looking at the classification made by the US Army, they are kind of relevant. But on the other hand, the XM5 does go a bit to the extreme of how the M4 and the M16 can be used. Looking at the original usage of M4 and M16, the XM5 is quite far off. Since the option is the XM250 automatic rifle, the US Army is stepping further away from the classic spray and pray assault rifle, and closer to either a very controlled assault rifle, which is rather precise, supported by LMGs, which kind of moves closer to the assault rifle if you look at how it can be utilized. What I think is very odd from DICE is that they named it M5A3, indicating the lineage of M16 and M4, but they turned it closer to an SMG. It basically means that they did a very opposite compared to what the US Army tried to achieve with their NGSV program, and it also means that although it really looks like an XM5, it behaves nothing like it. And on that bombshell, it's time for me to take a well, see you later. Cheers!